Ever wondered how the Killers of the Realm interact outside of the trials? Today we're looking at just that. I've separated the relationships into different sections to discuss one by one. Then at the end I have a little graphic I want to share showing off where I think each of the killers would reside outside of the trials, and who with. So let's get into it. Family is going to kick us off. Yeah, some of the killers are actually direct family, and so have a pre-existing relationship inside of the realm. The Yamaokas consists of Kazan Yamaoka and his great ×5 granddaughter, Rin Yamaoka. This would be quite a strained relationship, I think, with Kazan being responsible for the collapse of the Yamaoka bloodline, and sort of inadvertently the trigger for Rin's death. He'd feel a great guilt when around her, and want to do his best to fix it, I think, seeing the weakness of Rin's father to kill his own daughter. Rin would also be in a tough spot, faced with one of her ancestors she wanted to actively reject before the realm. She has an encounter with him in a dream, in fact, where she sort of sides with him briefly, due to her anger for her father being greater, but she doesn't give in, so I do think it'd be a strained relationship. Rin seems very split between two sides now though, and so I think she'd sometimes be on board with his training and anger and rage, but other times want to reject and even directly fight Kazan maybe. It's a complicated relationship. Nothing simple about this family. The Deshayes are Victor and Charlotte of the twins. They likely have a pretty good relationship, and I could see them residing on the outskirts of a woodland realm, like Macmillan maybe, or the Red Forest. They'd live peacefully and try not to interact with any others, simply wanting peace. Or at least Charlotte would. I'm not too sure about Victor. Charlotte is likely just grateful to have her brother back, but probably is aware too that he's not quite the same and is a creation of the entity. This will make the relationship strained a bit too, I think, but she'll still love him regardless and appreciate that he's alive once more, even if things aren't quite the way they should be. Knight and his guards I would sort of consider family, based on how the lore phrases everything, and Knight's endless devotion to them. They act as brothers almost, despite not being related originally. Tahoe, Sander, Durkos, and Alejandro fought alongside each other within the Guardia Campania for years, and for a long while after. They went through hell together, and formed a very close, trusting bond. Sure, they're all pretty twisted monsters who enjoy raiding and slaughtering villages full of people, but they're still very much a family. The relationship, I imagine, isn't strained at all in this case. Knight is likely just grateful they're there at all, with him. It'd maybe be a bit strained with the guards now trapped in a banner, I suppose. But assuming they can roam free outside of the trials, I think it'd be fine. I could see them roaming from realm to realm, sort of picking fights with everyone though, wanting to prove their prowess to recreate their glory days. Yeah, I could just see them trying to fight literally everyone. The Legion, in a similar way, I think are sort of a family. Frank, Julie, Susie, and Joey, despite their violent tendencies, do seem to really care for one another quite deeply. They see the world as an injustice and want to do justice for one another. Frank and Julie are quite manipulative, but this does seem to come with a genuine care for the others. I could see them still residing in Ormond and keeping up their base camp there. They'd be maybe a little cautious of others due to them being teenagers at the end of the day. They'd likely actually be scared of many of the other killers, even if they didn't admit it. Still a little tight-knit family residing in Ormond. Billy and Bubba are not officially family, but I could see them creating a bond together, considering they both likely reside, when outside of the trials, in Coldwind Farm. I feel like they have to get along together somewhat, and may sort of act like brothers. Neither are the best communicators, but I do think they could get along still and keep the farm going. Unknown and Demogorgon is the other pairing I could think of. One of them is looking for its dog, and the other is a perfect dog candidate. Sorted family. Huntress I could also see trying to steal certain characters like Hag, Spirit, Sadako, basically any of the younger female cast of killers, with her wanting to act as a mother toward them, taking them back to her cabin. They'd all be pretty resistant though, I think, and pretty freaked out. Moving on to friends. This one is interesting. I mean, how likely is it that a group of killers are capable of forming any meaningful relationship? Probably fairly low. Let's take a look though. First, at the canon friendships that we haven't touched on so far. There aren't really any canon ones, to be fair, but these are the closest to canon through some theories. Houndmaster and Clown may have a hinted canonical relationship. It all comes from a line Houndmaster says, When using Amori, she says she'll take one of the survivor's fingers for a pal. In the context of the realm, there's the resident finger guy, Clown, so it sort of suggests that they could have become pals in the realm. The only counter I have to this is that I don't think Portia would like Clown, this grotesque, lazy, and indulgent person, when she's almost the opposite of all of those things. I could see them bonding over their cruelty, so I suppose that could work still. The other sort of theorized one, but one I really love the idea of, is Trickster and Skull Merchant. This is down to a golden mask Trickster has that he wears for his Brazilian tour. Skull Merchant is from Brazil, and of course also wears very flashy, luxurious masks. The theory goes that Trickster visited Rio and linked up with Skull Merchant, with her being the designer of his gold mask. I really love that, and I do think they'd get along in the realm too. I could see Trickster hanging out at Skull Merchant's base of operations, and the two of them bonding over their love of power, wealth, and death. Also, how they would go about it very performatively. I could see them actually sort of bonding over their stories and enjoying one another's company. Scientists. Wesker, Blight, Doctor. I could see these three getting along, all having a love and desire to learn more and experiment in weird ways. I don't think they'd all necessarily get along or agree on lots of issues, but I do think they'd have sort of a friendship surrounding their love of experimentation and having interest in how the human mind works. Wesker even has sort of a canonical interest in the Blight Serum, with him intentionally injecting himself and combining it with Ouroboros to see the outcome. Doctor provides a unique area they'll likely be both interested in too, with the only downside being that all of them are quite insane. Singularity I could see maybe joining up with this group too, but I'm not sure if his interest in them would trump his hatred for humanity. I think probably not. Tinkerers, Billy and Deathslinger. These two I think would bond over their love of tinkering and inventing. They both have a similar brutal style too. Billy's inventions seem to include his chainsaw and hammer, and various art pieces, if you can call them that, sprawled across the farm. I could see him and Deathslinger bonding over this. Sure, Billy can't speak, but he could still share his inventions and ideas, and I'm sure Caleb would have an appreciation for their creativity but also twisted nature. They'd form a pretty genuine friendship, I think, over this. I could see them both taking an interest in Pig too, with all the schematics and interesting contraptions she has in Gideon Meat Plant. She can maybe even tell them about Jigsaw, and the two of them become honorary disciples. Master and Apprentice, Ghostface and Legion. Legion are supposedly an original version of the Ghostfaces from Scream, so this sort of makes sense that they'd look up to Danny specifically. Ghostface, after all, is basically what Legion want to be and want to be seen as. Meticulous killers who will go down in history. Ghosty has already achieved that, creating a legend around himself. Legion may have even known of him before the realm, and aspired to be like him. It'd be like meeting your heroes. I could also see him goading Legion into doing some silly things, like throwing rocks at Nemesis or something, causing him to chase them down. There's actually a really interesting graphic that Behavior released of all of the interactions and thoughts that Ghosty has with other killers and survivors. He comments that they love metal, like the music, maybe they like metal too, and are not entirely unpleasant people, meaning he's probably talked to them and even taken a liking to them. On this note, we also have some other canon interactions of Ghosty with others. So Ghosty interactions can be a quick subsection. With Trapper, Ghostface seems to like his mask but not his hygiene, and the fact that his cloak sometimes gets trapped in his bear traps. This is interesting too because it sort of suggests that Ghosty roams around different realms, and in Macmillan specifically, Trapper has set up an area of bear traps, probably to keep the other killers away. It could also be just during 2v8 that Ghosty means this. So I do think Trapper is largely a recluse on Macmillan though. For Huntress, it seems like Ghosty may have been attacked by her, commenting on her good aim. He comments on Deathslinger's excessive laughter, Wraith's sadness yet effectiveness at killing, and also suggests that Wraith walks around cloaked behind other killers and freaks them out a bit, which is a surprising thing to come from Ghostface, honestly. It shows just how stealthy that guy can be, I suppose. He comments on Oni's loud screaming and incredibly fast pace despite his size. He notes that Blight is a pinball, smart, and not a big talker. He's confused by Billy's speed and a little annoyed by his screaming, seemingly. This seems to be a common occurrence actually, that he doesn't like loud noises, interestingly. Nurse, he's jealous of her abilities but worried she's going to bang into some walls. He's also fascinated by Spirit's ability and how scared everyone is of her. So pretty interesting and a good insight into how the killers interact, I think. Or at least how Ghostface perceives the others. Artists. Artist and Trapper. I think this is sort of a sweet pairing. Two killers who do have humanity within still, I think, and do have knowledge of their past lives present also. Trapper had a love for art, and so I think he would bond with Kamina, the artist of the realm. He'd want to learn from her and study how she draws and paints. I could see it being a sweet relationship, with it allowing Kamina to be in touch with her prior life, and the same for Trapper too, a bridge of humanity between them. Speaking of humanity, those with humanity, Trapper, Wraith, Nurse Hag, Artist Spirit, and Twins, I think all have a chance of being able to communicate well enough together and form a sort of support group for the people who may feel a bit like they don't belong. They all share the fact that they still have a remnant of humanity, a shred of wanting to be better, and wanting to get out of the realm maybe. This is a really up-in-the-air group though, and really dependent on how willing and vulnerable each of them are to one another. Now let's look at those who would keep away from the others, the killers who would not want to interact with the others for one reason or another. Vecna would be a bit of a creep, I think, even to the killers. He'd feel above them for one, and feel superior thinking he's studying the realm. He'd treat all the others as subjects almost, I think. He'd comment on them, maybe experiment on them a bit, who knows. But I think he'd maybe interact, but when he did, he'd treat it like he's learning. He wouldn't have a genuine relationship with anyone. It'd all be veiled in his superiority and means of studying the realm. He'd mostly keep to the sidelines, watching and interacting when he wanted to learn of the others there. Dracula, I think, would be relatively similar. He wouldn't really form much of a connection with many and would maybe view the realm more as a learning experience, staying up in his castle and studying all of the various killers and creatures he could find in the realm, maybe even looking to recruit some to his cause. Plague would likely struggle quite a bit, with her being one of the most out-of-place characters to everyone else. She likely cannot understand the language of anyone else, and she's from thousands of years in the past. She has no point of connection really to these people. She also just likely doesn't like them anyway. She's very devout and religious, and none of them are really. I could see her interactions amounting to her going around, saying her prayers, and trying to get the others to join in, only to not be understood, and likely to be a bit disgusted by the plague she carries, worried that they're going to get infected. I think she spends most of her time contemplating inside of the Temple of Purgation. Pyramid Head, I get the feeling, just goes back into rest when he's out of the trials. The lore mentions he was about to enter the long rest before the entity calls on him. I sort of feel like he just goes to sleep in Midwich and when he's not needed, sort of like a hibernation mode, or like a standby mode, you know, that kind of thing. Nemesis I could see being the same, just sort of chilling outside of the trials with nothing to do, walking around and kicking rocks type of thing. Maybe he just sits in the RPD library and tries to improve his reading comprehension level beyond the word stars. Pinhead I could see not being too dissimilar to Vecna and sort of studying more than interacting with others. I could see him making some sort of surface level relationships with some of the killers like Clown maybe, who would be on board with his whole pleasure and pain thing, but I think Pinhead would mostly stay apart and want to focus more so on the trials and less on the killers. Kaneki I think would really struggle to interact with anyone, with him being kept in a perpetual state of hunger seemingly, and unable to interact with anyone. I think people would keep away too, seeing as he may try and jump at you for your flesh. I think he'd choose to keep away therefore as well, in order to not attack the others, which would ultimately cause a lot of chaos and likely end up pretty badly for him. Maybe he roams the fog instead, searching for various creatures to feast on. Maybe he could have a relationship with some of the more relaxed characters like Artist or something, a similar maroon soul type who he may relate to. Wraith I could see being relatively similar, being a sad boy. He'd go off to a corner somewhere in Autohaven and cloak in a corner until the entity needed him again. What about the ones who couldn't choose this though? The ones that the others keep away from them. Myers would just stand around staring and heavily breathing. Like that. And I think that's just all he would do for everyone. He might tolerate some killers hanging around him, but I honestly think he'd just try and kill most who try to approach him. So I do think people would avoid him. Sadako I think would be similar too, just sort of roaming around and seeing the sights, but if anyone approaches her, she'd just start to kill them. Freddy I also think most of the killers even would just hate. They'd be creeped out by him too, and learning about what he did, I even think many of the killers would be pretty disgusted by him, and he would sort of naturally be outcast. Also, due to his perspective and ego, he wouldn't really want to interact with others either, I think, leaving him to be creepy and alone in his little crawl space in Baden. Springtrap would be viewed as the sort of weird, corny guy who's laughing at his own jokes and hiding away in the pizzeria tinkering with the endoskeletons all day. He'd be grateful every time someone came to visit him, but it wouldn't happen very often. I think if he did try and go out and visit others, they'd sort of turn away a bit and be a bit uncomfortable around him. This weird little goofy guy who thinks he's one of the group sort of thing. Singularity sort of just hates all of humanity, and so I think most would just stay away from him, considering most are human, so yeah, that's about that. Unknown, I think, would roam between the realms a lot, and likely freak out a lot of the killers, even some of the tougher ones. I could see it just scurrying around, learning and listening, and taking the voices of those it comes into contact with. Maybe it freaks out Legion and Ormond, or maybe goes to Larry's and gets chased down by the Doctor. I'm not too sure, but I do think it'd be a bit of a free agent and freak everyone out. There is sort of canonical suggestion it's done this too, based on certain lines like, "Have you seen my dog?" possibly coming from Houndmaster, who was at one point searching for her dog, which is quite interesting. Chucky, I think, would be the peak of messing with the other killers though. He'd roam around being an annoying little guy, yapping in everyone's ears and scurrying about everywhere. I think they'd all find him so annoying, but give him a bit of a break due to his tininess, but also occasionally punt him across the realm. Onto those who simply can't communicate. Xenomorph I could see being very reserved, partly due to its inability to communicate, but also because it likely just hates humanity in general, including most of the killers. I think it'd find a nice spot on the Nostromo realm and roam around trying to find ways to reproduce. It'd maybe even look to the killers, which I'm sure would create some awkward altercations. Demogorgon I think is the same. It'd just roam around Hawkins, maybe scratch at the big portal in the portal room trying to get home, maybe it chases some crows around or something like that. I think it would get along with pretty much every killer, considering if it was peaceful with them. I think that's the question though. Will it be peaceful, or would it try and just attack anything or anyone it comes into contact with? I'm not too sure. Dredge is a bit of a tough case, as it doesn't really have a personality and isn't even a being in the same sense as the others. I could see it just sort of roaming around the Garden of Joy and not really doing much to bother anyone, aside Clown I guess. That's the one thing I could see Dredge doing, is sort of floating into different realms, looking for things to consume. For example, Maurice. Maybe it goes and freaks the Legion out or chases down Hag in the swamp, I don't know. Enemies is a tricky category, as most of the characters in the realm are all on the same page morality-wise. They're all killers at this point. I can't see there being much division between them that wouldn't be solved with them simply separating or moving apart from one another. There's a few I could think of though that may be enemies, but it largely comes down to if they can communicate, which I don't think they can really, because I think there could be some differences in that sense in the realm. For example, someone like Plague, someone highly devoted to the entity, compared to someone like Blight, who's maybe quite defiant, or Trapper even say. She may sort of hate them and become enemies with them, disliking their disloyalty to something she views as her god. But again, I don't know if she would understand that relationship and their relationship with the entity, if that makes sense. I could see characters like Billy, for example, really disliking people like Freddy, a character who was very abusive toward children, and a character like Billy being abused a lot as a child. I think he would truly hate someone like Freddy and really want to take his anger out on him. But again, how would Billy ever know what Freddy did? And, you know, you see what I mean? I feel like it comes down to how well each of the characters can actually communicate. There may be some enemies made in the realm, but it really depends on how much they express about their backstories, and how much they even come into contact with each other. Again, someone like Freddy I don't really see leaving his own realm, and so it's unlikely he ever shares his stories. Spirit I could also see having a hatred for some of the sort of angrier, older male characters as well, with them reminding her of her father. She's very rage-fueled at this point, so I think she'll largely just see red in this sense. So yeah, there's a couple ideas I had. I think it's quite tricky though, again, just based on the fact that it largely relies on communication, I think, for them to hate one another, aside maybe just being generally annoyed by characters like Chucky yapping, and so on. Finally today, let's talk about romantic relationships, which is a little weird to consider, isn't it? There are some canon relationships though existing already, these being Frank and Julie of the Legion, who are confirmed girlfriend and boyfriend. Their relationship does seem largely structured on their love of violence and mayhem, but there does seem to be a genuine love between them still. Susie and Julie also have something between them, but in this case from Susie liking Julie, and not the other way around. This was something revealed in the Legion comics, where we see Susie has a liking for Julie. Nurse and Wraith is our final one, and one that has bounced in and out of canon. It was first confirmed canon, then got removed, then it was brought back again sort of with the ghosty graphic, so it's sort of unclear. I like this one though, and I like the idea of these two broken souls finding one another and connecting. It's not like they have to be, you know, like making out or something, right? It's a deeper connection, I think, than that, and romantic, but not explicitly or sort of physically, right? In terms of shipping speculation on my part, I don't really have anything to contribute. It's not my thing, really, and I honestly can't really envision any of the killers sparking a relationship like that in the realm. Feel free to share your own ships, though, down below. Hey everyone! Now we've reached the section of the video where I'm going to be discussing where I think each of the killers would reside in the various realms when outside of the trials. So first up we have Wraith over here. I just put Wraith in Autohaven. I'm not going to do all of the sort of individual realms or all the individual maps within the realms. I'm just counting them as sort of one realm in this case. So for Wraith, he's in Autohaven. We have Billy and Bubba, both in Coldwind or the Thompson House. We have Hag in Backwater Swamp. We have Nurse in Crotus Pren. So far, they're basically just in their respective realms, which is generally what you can see across or throughout the graphic here. There's just a few cases where obviously when killers don't have a specific realm to reside in, they need a place, and so I've sort of tried to place them. We have Clown in Father Campbell's chapel, where the circus is, but Houndmaster's also there because of their sort of hinted at sort of friendship they have, so I've put her there too. There's not really like a sort of like a sea-themed map that I could think of to sort of place her in, so I thought, okay, just place her in with Clown. We have Xeno on the Nostromo. I could imagine Xeno sort of just residing in the Nostromo wreckage. Singularity on Devaka, hanging out in the spaceship area, probably. We have Artist on Area of Crows. This might be a bit hard for her, being there again, but I do think she'd stay there. We can also see her easels and stuff as well on the upper floors, so I do think she stays there. We then have Pig, of course, on The Game, and I think she'd specifically reside in the workshop area. There's also like a bed there, so I think she does actually sleep there too. Deathslinger, of course, in the Grave of Glenvale or Dead Dog Saloon. I think people would go to the saloon quite a lot. It'd be a little bit of a killer hotspot. There's also, of course, that poker game in the back room, if you know what I'm talking about, with Maya's knife in the table. Going down, we have Myers in Haddonfield, Demogorgon in Hawkins, Doctor in Larry's, and then we have this one. This represents Macmillan, so we have Trapper, who I think would reside in the wider Macmillan area, and then we have Skull Merchant specifically on Shelter Woods, and then I think Trickster would sort of stay with her in her little cabin thing. For Ormond Lake Mine, I decided to put Kaneki there, because I thought, oh, he's someone who's going to want to try and stay away from the other killers, in case he suddenly, you know, bursts into a rage and feels the need to feed. He wants to be away from everyone, to sort of not cause any chaos outside of the trials. So I think he would sort of restrict himself to an abandoned realm like Ormond Lake Mine. It'll keep him chilled out. For Main Ormond, or the Ormond Resort, I've put Legion there, and then also Ghostface. And I was thinking about this. I was thinking, I think Legion would hang out in the cabin, but then they'd give Ghostface like a special like a room or like office in the upper floors, you know, sort of as their boss almost. In the RPD, I think Wesker would stay there, and then I think Nemesis would as well. Maybe they'd take a wing each. I could see Wesker probably residing in the Stars office. To be fair, Nemesis would probably want to go there too. Then we have Mother's Dwelling, specifically in the Red Forest, and I put twins there, and I think Huntress wouldn't mind the twins if they just stayed on like the outskirts, because obviously I think twins are mostly used to living out in the woods, so I thought they could sort of reside on the outskirts and that'd be fine. And then Huntress stays in the main cabin. We then have Plague at the Temple of Purgation. We have Pyramid Head in Midwich. I think he'd honestly just roam the halls, or like I said in the video, he'd go into a long rest sort of thing. Then we have Freddy, who would be a creepy little guy and stay in Badham, probably in his in the boiler room and in the crawl space, I'd imagine. We then have Vecna on his dungeon map, and he'd probably mainly stay in his sort of office space down below. We have Knight, who'd stay in the Borgo. For the pizzeria, I've put Springtrap there. And then I also thought maybe Chucky too. I think these two would have sort of a rivalry. They'd maybe be like sort of enemies, but also sort of friends, you know? A bit of both. Like they'd sort of annoy each other quite a lot, I think. But I could see Chucky hanging around the pizzeria, sort of as a fun location to sort of mess around in, I guess. Then we have Unknown, who I think would largely stay around Greenville Cinema. However, I think a bit like Blight, who I've put down here as free roaming. And what I mean by this is roaming between the realms, at like these realms, and not sticking to anything in particular. I think he'd be like a free agent, he'd always be on the move. He would have nowhere to call home necessarily. And I think sometimes Unknown would be the same as well. But I also think it would reside in Greenville, generally speaking. We then have Dredge at the Garden of Joy, where it was sort of created from or was spawned into. We have the Yamaoka estate, where I've placed Oni and Rin, and they could reside in different areas, because obviously there's the other map, the Sanctum, as well as the family residence. And then I've also placed Sadako there as well, because I didn't really know where else to place her. The Yamaokas would understand Sadako's plight, as it were. And I think they would be accepting of her. And I think it also just makes sense that she'd want to stay somewhere where, you know, she may be reminded of her home as well in Japan. So for Dracula, I think he wouldn't reside in a realm. He'd just reside in his castle that he got to bring along with him. So yeah. And then finally we have Pinhead, who I think would reside in various basements across the realms. He'd just be hiding down in the basement with his Cenobite bros. And I think that's everything. I do hope you enjoyed that, and let me know where you think everyone would reside as well. I also wanted to do a little bit of a quick sort of plug before I ended this video here, and it's specifically for my Twitch, which I've actually started to consistently stream on. So you could find it here. It's just simply twitch.tv/AZHYMOVS, and you can come follow me. I'm going to be streaming Monday to Thursday every week for about 3 hours from these times right here. So yeah, come along if you get a chance. Drop a follow. It'd be greatly appreciated, and I hope to see some of you all there. So thank you. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.